Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing the medication book tag, which was created by This Cubed, and I will link their YouTube channel down in the description below. So I heard about this tag as soon as it came out, and I watched This Cube's video about it right away, and I was immediately super intrigued because it's about different like antidepressant medications that This Cube has tried, and sort of like the books are based on the side effects of the medications, which I find to be really interesting. I've also personally been really interested in this one because I've tried almost all of the antidepressants. At least it feels like I've tried almost all of them. I'm sure there's some that I haven't tried yet, but I feel like a lot of these names are familiar and a lot of the side effects are super familiar. So this is going to be an interesting tag, and maybe you'll find a little bit out about me and antidepressants as we do this tag. The first prompt is LEXAPRO. This made my depression worse. Name a book with a depressing ending or a book that made you cry. For this, I'm going to do a book that made me cry, and that book is Lore by Alexander Bracken. So when I read Lore, I became really super invested in it, and there was this like cliffhanger at the end of a chapter where I thought my favorite character died, and I started crying. And I think that was the last time I've cried reading a book because I don't cry reading books often. So I'm going with Lore for this one. Lore has a really complex plot, so it's hard to describe it really briefly, but I'm gonna try my best. So in Lore, there is a bunch of Greek gods who have been punished and are put on Earth. And once every few years, they become mortal. And there's these like families that are descendants of different Greek heroes. Now, if one of these families kills one of the gods, they get their powers and get their immortality. So it turns into this like bloody competition to try and kill the Greek gods to get their powers. So it's sort of like Greek mythology mixed with the Hunger Games, but with super duper complex and deep plot lines. So I really love Lore, but it did make me really emotional because of a cliffhanger. My favorite character didn't even die. It was just a cliffhanger and I started crying. I have a whole reading blog for Lore, so I will link that down in the description below, but I'm sort of pathetic in the reading blog with me crying over a cliffhanger because I like stopped reading at the cliffhanger that night and then I read it the next night and I was like, oh, they're not dead. And I'm pretty sure I have been on LEXAPRO before. I don't recall off the top of my head the symptom that I had issues with LEXAPRO, but LEXAPRO didn't work for me. Next up is ZOLOFT. This worked for me at first, but eventually stopped. Name a book you fell out of love with. I've been on ZOLOFT before. I think ZOLOFT is the big one to blame for my sleep schedule currently. Oh my gosh. Okay. So basically I was put on a medication. I am almost 100% sure it was ZOLOFT. And during this time, my depression was really bad. But I also was having issues with my weight. Shout out to chronic health conditions making my weight randomly fluctuate. So I had been on ZOLOFT in the past and I didn't have too bad of a reaction to it, but my psychiatrist at the time was like, well, it's in your chart that ZOLOFT gave you a side effect of making you gain weight and you're too thin right now, so let's put you back on ZOLOFT. So I was like, okay, great. And I don't know if just the dosing was too high or what, but when I got put on ZOLOFT, I could not sleep until midnight, no matter how hard I tried to make myself fall asleep earlier, and my body was an actual brick until noon. Like, I was not able to move my body. My body felt like it was weighed down with heavy bricks until noon each day. So that was the start of my sleep issues. Yay, side effects of medications that I'm still feeling the side effects like 5 years later, even though I haven't taken it in like 5 years. Anyways, a book that I fell out of love with is Magic by Septimus Heap, I believe. So Magic is this book that I can't even tell you what it's about now, but I remember I read it when I was like 11 or 12 and I was like, this is gonna be life-changing. This is gonna be the next Harry Potter. I'm gonna be obsessed with this. And then 2 weeks later, I was like, did I actually like it as much as I thought I liked it? And fast forward to now, I really don't care about that book anymore, and I don't remember anything about it. I think I still have it back there in my TV stand filled with books that I've read. The huge bookshelf is books that I haven't read. Stuff in the TV stand is ones that I have read. But, like, I just don't care about it anymore, and I have no desire to finish the series. I have no desire to reread the book. Like, it felt like it was just a phase, because honestly, I could care less about that book, and my phase of being obsessed with it lasted for like 2 weeks, which is the shortest time that I've ever had an obsession over a book. Next up is VIIBRYD. I've never heard of this one. Does it have any other names? I've never heard of this one, but there's a chance that I've been on it because I've been on so many that I can't remember all their names. This one says, I got a free trial of this only to find out it wasn't covered by my insurance. Name the most expensive book you own. The joys of insurance, denying important medications and helping you pay for it. It's so special. I had a medication that I needed, and I mean, thank God I didn't get that medication because like, turns out that I was like incorrectly diagnosed with something. Specifically, I was incorrectly diagnosed with thrush and I got prescribed this medication. I went to go pick it up. Now my insurance is really good, so most of my medications are less than $5, and they were like, this medication is $80. At the time I thought I had thrush, so I was like, I'm not paying $80 for thrush medication. Thrush is gross, it's uncomfortable, it's not painful, it's not gonna end my life. So I was like, screw you, that's too expensive. So let me go grab the most expensive book I own. So I'm actually gonna do two for this. One is like the most expensive in terms of like what I bought it for, and the other one is the most expensive in terms of what I feel like would sell the most. I haven't looked into selling it because I have no desire to sell it, but yeah. So let's start with the one that was the most expensive. And disclaimer that this was a gift to me, but I fully am aware of how much it cost, and the cost is the sole reason why I wasn't initially going to buy it for myself, and then I got it for like my birthday or Christmas one year. This is The Art of Harry Potter. It's a Barnes & Noble exclusive. Look how, ow, look how big it is compared to my head. This was $75. Let me see if I can hold up a page. It's so heavy. It's just basically different artwork from the Harry Potter series. I could do a flip through of this sometime if anybody is curious about what's in here. But yes, this cost $75. Although I believe it was from my parents, and we have a Barnes & Noble membership. I don't know if we're going to renew our membership because like it seems like Barnes & Noble is trying to charge more for a new membership thing, and I'm like, I don't really know if I can justify paying for that. But my family has had the Barnes & Noble membership for like several years, so there was like a slight discount. There's like a 10% discount or whatever the discount is for the membership, or was for the membership, because now the membership's changed. Now the one that I think like could be the most expensive in terms of selling is Half-Blood Prince, but hear me out. This isn't a normal copy of Half-Blood Prince. This is signed by the illustrator for the chapter headings. So this is signed by the person who drew all these chapter headings. I think I've talked about this before, but in case I haven't, I was in the hospital in 2020 and mentally I was not doing good. Yeah, really, really terrible. And there was this, what's it called? So like when you're in the hospital, there's the nurses, and then there's the like assistant to the nurses, like they're step below nurses. They're more for just like checking in, taking vitals, and like I had to have, oh geez. I feel like it's appropriate to talk about this while doing this tag because it's medication book tag, but if you no longer want to live, it's a kind way of putting it, you have like one of them come in and like monitor you 24/7, and I had to have that happen. And I sort of like bonded with one of them. Like she was super kind, and she like talked about Harry Potter with me, and she like was just super chill with me, and she truthfully helped me get through my time in that hospital because mentally and physically was not doing great. And she was like, hey, I have a copy of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince that's signed by the illustrator that I happened to get at a like used bookstore. And she was like, I'll give it to you. And I was like really drugged up on medication. And I was like, okay. And I was excited, but also I couldn't feel emotion very much. So I was like pretty much monotone, like, okay. And I wish I could like track her down and thank her for this because it means the world to me. But I was so drugged up on medications that I could like not thank her as much as I wish I could have thanked her for it. Next up is WELLBUTRIN. I'm pretty sure I've been on WELLBUTRIN before because it sounds really familiar. I'm like looking up different names for the medications as I'm doing this because there's tons of different names for each medication. So WELLBUTRIN, this made my anxiety worse. Name a book that kept you on the edge of your seat. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, although I wouldn't say that this is necessarily like a good book because it's very traumatizing and very triggering. But yeah, it kept me on the edge of my seat and it made me really paranoid, and I had to DNF it after like, I think it was like 40%, and I very rarely DNF books, but this was impacting my mental health because of how bad it was making my anxiety and depression. Pretty Girls essentially follows this girl, this woman, and at the start of the book, her husband dies. And after her husband dies, she goes home and she finds some, what's it called? Is it like slash porn? Like, what is it called? I don't know. But she finds some like very violent porn on her husband's computer, and it changes everything because she thought her husband was this great guy, and it sets her on a downward spiral of trying to figure out what happened and what's going on. So it's very intense and very graphic and very much made my anxiety and depression worse while reading it, so that's why I had to quit reading the book. Next up, REMERON. This made me gain weight and didn't even help my anxiety. Name a chunky book on your TBR that you're worried won't be worth it. I'm gonna go grab it so that I can show you how thick it is. So I'm choosing The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon for this one. Now, my reason for choosing this one and why I am worried that it might not be worth it is for a couple reasons. First of all, this is a huge commitment. Second of all, this is high fantasy. High fantasy is very hit or miss with me because sometimes high fantasy feels really convoluted and it requires a lot of me like researching what's going on in the story and the world to like fully understand it more. Like, it just is so much work. Another thing is, I've heard from some people that this book feels like it should be like more than one book and not just one giant book. So a little worried that this one won't be worth it, but I'm hoping to get to it at some point because I've mostly heard positive things about it. If anyone's read this book, you should let me know what you think of it. Next up, KLONOPIN. KLONOPIN? I don't know if I've been on this one or not. I've never heard of the name. When I look it up though, it says clonazepam, and that sounds really familiar, so I might have been on it. So for this one, it says this is actually a scheduled substance. Name a banned book that you love. For this, I'm just gonna go with Harry Potter because obviously I love Harry Potter, as you can probably tell from this video. I mean, I'm wearing a Harry Potter shirt right now. Harry Potter is a banned book, obviously, and I love Harry Potter. I am someone who can separate the author from the work, but not everyone can do that, and I am totally understanding of that. For me, I can. If you can't, I'm so sorry you can't, but also I understand. The next question is ABILIFY. This made me super sleepy. Name a book that put you to sleep. I read The Arabian Nights, and that made me so sleepy. Let me see if I can find what edition I read of it, because there's like tons of different editions of this book. Also, while I'm waiting for Goodreads to load, why did it randomly get so hot in my part of Oregon? Like, literally last week it was so cold that I was like, maybe we'll have another chance for snow this year. And now I'm in my room dying from how hot it is, and every time I step outside, I'm dying from the heat. What is going on with Oregon weather? Why is Oregon like this? Okay, so I'm pulling it up on Goodreads right now. So the version that I read was translated by Hussein Hadway, and it was edited by Muzan Mahdi. And I find the publisher. W.W. Norton and Company is what Goodreads says. Honestly, this book was so dull and boring that I could barely get through it. And there's sometimes books that are so boring that I'm like setting a goal for myself in the day. I'll be like, I need to read 50 pages, and then after I read 50 pages, I fall asleep. That's what happened with The Arabian Nights. It just drags on and on and on for no reason, and there's some like really graphic stuff in there, but the way that it's written wasn't even like impacting me like something so graphic and triggering should have impacted me, because it was written in such a slow way that I was like, okay, these horrible things are happening and I'm about to fall asleep right now because of this book. So yeah, that was a fun one to read. And the final prompt is AMBIEN. This says, fun fact, AMBIEN and ABILIFY counteract each other, so when I was on both, I could never sleep. Name a book that kept you up late. I don't really read like right before I go to bed. I read a few hours before I go to bed, because I know that if I read right before I would go to bed, I would just stay up later and be like, it's okay, I can just finish this book tonight, it's totally fine. So I don't do that because I try and prioritize my sleep. But I used to do that, and the last one that I can remember that kept me up late was The Conference of the Birds by Ransom Riggs. I love the Miss Peregrine series, and the Conference of the Birds was one of my favorite in the series. And the Conference of the Birds, and I believe also the Library of Souls and Map of Days, I believe all three of those kept me up really late at night reading, because that was my phase of when I read right before I fell asleep. And then I was like, this isn't sustainable to constantly be losing sleep because I want to finish a book. Speaking of medications, just want to shout out duloxetine, prazosin, and Seroquel for being the perfect cocktail for me at this moment in time. I say cocktail, but if you don't know, like, depression meds, they call it a cocktail and they put like multiple meds together, and that combination works perfectly for my little depressed brain that lacks serotonin. So yeah, I hope that this video was interesting. I know that it's a lot like deeper than some of my other videos because we're talking about antidepressants, but I thought this would be a fun take to do, especially since I have dealt with so many different antidepressants. So that's all for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I try to upload a video at least once a week, so feel free to subscribe and stick around for all of my future videos. I hope all of you have a great week, and I'll see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.